One date on your calendar this July could mean the difference between paying your rent on time or scrambling to cover it. And if you don't know exactly where you fall in the Social Security payment schedule, you could be checking your bank account every single day for nothing. Millions of Americans are about to receive their July 2026 Social Security payments. But here's the part almost nobody explains clearly. Not everyone gets paid on the same day. Some people get their money in the first week of the month. Others wait almost until the end. And if you've ever wondered why your neighbor's deposit shows up a full week before yours, even though you're both collecting retirement benefits, you're about to find out exactly why. Welcome back to Prime Move Guide, the channel built for Americans who want straight answers about Social Security, Medicare, SSI, and SSDI without the confusing government language. If this is your first time here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button because we break down exactly what's happening with your benefits every single month in plain English with no fluff. Now let's get into it. Let's start with Michael. Michael is 67 years old, a retired firefighter living in Nevada. He spent nearly 3 decades pulling people out of burning buildings, and now he's settled into a quieter life, collecting his Social Security retirement benefits every month. Michael isn't on SSI. He isn't on SSDI. He's a standard retirement beneficiary. And that one detail matters more than most people realize, because it determines exactly when his July payment lands in his account. Here's what most people don't realize about the Social Security payment schedule. The Social Security Administration doesn't send everyone their check on the first of the month like an old pension plan. Instead, payments are spread out across the month based on 2 main factors: when you started receiving benefits and your date of birth. This system was put in place years ago to prevent the SSA systems from being overwhelmed by millions of payments processing at once and to make sure banks aren't flooded with deposits on a single day. So if you're someone like Michael, who has been collecting retirement benefits for years, your payment date depends entirely on the day of the month you were born. If you were born between the 1st and the 10th of any month, your payment typically arrives on the 2nd Wednesday of the month. If you were born between the 11th and the 20th, you're paid on the 3rd Wednesday. And if your birthday falls between the 21st and the 31st, your payment lands on the 4th Wednesday. Michael was born on the 14th, which means he's in that second group, and his July payment is scheduled for the 3rd Wednesday of the month. Now here's where things get interesting, and where a lot of confusion starts online. There's one important exception to this birthday rule, and it trips up more people than you'd expect. Let's bring in Donna. Donna is 71 years old, a former librarian living in North Carolina, and she receives Supplemental Security Income, commonly known as SSI. Donna's situation is completely different from Michael's, and if she didn't understand the difference, she might spend the first half of July anxiously refreshing her banking app for no reason. SSI payments don't follow the birthday rule at all. Instead, SSI recipients are typically paid on the 1st of the month. That's the rule the Social Security Administration has used for years, and it's one of the most consistent parts of the entire system. So while Michael is waiting until the 3rd Wednesday for his retirement deposit, Donna already had her July SSI payment land right at the start of the month. But here's the twist that catches so many SSI recipients off guard, and it's exactly the kind of hidden rule we want you walking away from this video knowing. When the 1st of the month falls on a weekend or a federal holiday, the Social Security Administration moves the payment earlier to the last business day before that date. This means SSI recipients sometimes receive what looks like their July payment before July even technically begins. If you've ever seen your SSI deposit hit your account a day or 2 early and wondered if it was a mistake, now you know exactly why that happens. It's not a glitch. It's the system working exactly as designed. Donna learned this the hard way a few years ago. The first time her payment arrived early, she actually called her bank, worried that something had gone wrong with her account. The bank representative had to explain to her that the Social Security Administration had simply adjusted the date because of a holiday. Now, Donna keeps a small calendar taped inside her kitchen cabinet, marking exactly when to expect her payment each month. So she never has that moment of panic again. This brings up something worth pausing on. So many Social Security recipients spend unnecessary stress checking their accounts because they don't fully understand which category they fall into. Are you receiving retirement benefits? Are you on SSI? Are you on SSDI? Each of these has its own rhythm, its own schedule, And knowing yours can save you from a lot of unnecessary worry every single month. Let's bring Anthony into the conversation now. Anthony is 61 years old, a former electrician from Illinois, and he's currently receiving Social Security Disability Insurance, or SSDI. Anthony's case is a little different from both Michael's and Donna's, and his story shows just how layered this system really is. SSDI follows the same birthday-based schedule as retirement benefits, which means Anthony's payment date depends on when he was born, just like Michael's. Anthony was born on the 22nd, which puts him in that final group, the one that gets paid on the fourth Wednesday of the month. But here's something that confused Anthony for years before he finally understood it. If you started receiving Social Security benefits, whether retirement or SSDI, before May of 1997, you're actually paid on the third of the month instead of following the birthday schedule. That rule has stayed in place for decades, quietly affecting a smaller group of longtime beneficiaries who started collecting benefits before that cutoff date. Anthony didn't start receiving SSDI until years after that cutoff, so the birthday rule applies to him. But he has an older neighbor, a man who's been on Social Security since the early 90s, and that neighbor still gets paid on the third of every month like clockwork, regardless of his birthday. When Anthony first heard this, he assumed his neighbor was just lucky, or that there was some secret early payment program nobody told him about. It wasn't luck at all. It was simply a rule from a different era of the Social Security system that still applies to people who qualified before it changed. This is exactly the kind of detail that creates confusion across social media. People see their neighbor or relative getting paid earlier and assume something is wrong with their own account, when really it's just two different rules applying to two different situations. Now, let's talk about something that affects all three of our characters, and honestly, almost every Social Security recipient in the country. Direct deposit timing versus posting timing. Here's a mistake that trips up even people who have been collecting benefits for years. The Social Security Administration sends out the payment on the scheduled date, but your bank doesn't always post it to your account at exactly the same moment. Some banks post deposits the night before the official payment date. Others post it early in the morning on the actual date. And depending on your specific bank's processing schedule, you might see pending funds before they're fully available to spend. Michael ran into this exact situation a few months ago. His payment was scheduled for a Wednesday, and he checked his account that morning, saw nothing, and immediately assumed something had gone wrong. He almost called the Social Security office in a bit of a panic, but by checking again later that afternoon, the deposit had posted normally. Nothing was wrong. His bank simply processed it a little later in the day than he expected. This is one of those small but important reminders. Just because a payment hasn't shown up by 9 in the morning doesn't mean there's a problem. Give it the full day before assuming something went wrong. And if it's still missing by the next business day, that's when it makes sense to actually reach out to the Social Security Administration. Let's talk about another myth that circulates constantly online, especially around the start of every new month. There is no secret bonus payment, no surprise extra deposit, and no mysterious 13th check hiding somewhere in July. If you've seen headlines promising an extra payment or a special bonus check for Social Security recipients, treat that information carefully. The Social Security Administration has not announced any such extra payment for July 2026. Anything circulating online claiming otherwise should be treated as a rumor until it's confirmed directly on the official SSA website. We always want to be the channel that tells you the truth, even when the truth is less exciting than a viral headline. But here's something that is real, and something every one of our three characters has had to deal with at some point. The annual cost of living adjustment, often shortened to COLA. In plain English, COLA is the yearly increase that helps your Social Security payment keep up with rising prices, things like groceries, gas, and housing costs. This adjustment typically gets announced in October, based on inflation data from earlier in the year, and it takes effect starting with January payments. So if you're wondering whether your July payment reflects a brand new increase, the answer is that July payments are based on whatever COLA adjustment took effect at the start of the year, not a new mid-year change. The Social Security Administration doesn't adjust benefit amounts in the middle of the year outside of that annual process. Donna actually had a moment of confusion about this last year. She heard a rumor that there might be a mid-year increase, and she spent weeks expecting a higher payment that simply wasn't coming. When she finally checked the official SSA website, she realized the increase she heard about had already been applied back in January, and what she was hearing about wasn't a new boost at all, just people online discussing the same adjustment months later as if it were brand new. It's a great reminder that checking the source directly can save you from a lot of unnecessary confusion and disappointment. Now, here's something incredibly useful that not enough people take advantage of: the My Social Security online account. This free tool, available directly through the Social Security Administration's website, lets you check your exact payment date, your benefit amount, your earnings record, and even download official documents, all without ever having to call or visit an office. Anthony set his account up after spending nearly 45 minutes on hold trying to ask a simple question about his payment date. Once he had his online account set up, he never had to call again for routine questions like that. He simply logs in, checks his schedule, and goes about his day. If you haven't created your My Social Security account yet, it's genuinely one of the most useful things you can do this month. It takes just a few minutes, and it puts your information directly in your hands instead of leaving you guessing or waiting on hold. Let's go back to Michael for a moment, because his story actually touches on something that affects a huge number of retirees: Medicare Part B premiums. For most people receiving both Social Security and Medicare, the Part B premium, which is the part of Medicare that helps cover doctor visits and outpatient medical care, gets automatically deducted from your monthly Social Security payment before it ever reaches your bank account. This is why your deposit amount might look slightly different from what you expected if you're not factoring in that deduction. Michael noticed this the very first month he started receiving Medicare alongside his retirement benefits. His payment was smaller than he anticipated, and for a moment, he genuinely thought there had been some kind of mistake or reduction in his benefits. It wasn't a reduction at all. It was simply his Medicare Part B premium being deducted automatically, exactly as the system is designed to work. Once he understood that, the confusion disappeared completely. This is such a common moment of worry for new retirees, and it's exactly why we like to walk through these details slowly and clearly. A smaller than expected deposit doesn't automatically mean something has gone wrong. Sometimes it just means a standard deduction, like Medicare, has been applied. Let's shift back to Anthony for a moment, because his SSDI situation brings up another point worth understanding. People receiving SSDI sometimes worry about something called the trial work period, especially if they're considering going back to work in some capacity. In simple terms, this is a period that allows SSDI recipients to test their ability to work without immediately losing their benefits. Anthony hasn't gone through this himself yet, but he's been doing research because he's been offered some light consulting work in his old field. He's been careful to look into the actual rules directly through the Social Security Administration rather than relying on guesses from online forums, because this is exactly the kind of decision where getting accurate information matters enormously. This is a perfect example of something we want every viewer to take away from this video. Before you make any decision that could affect your benefits, whether it's about returning to work, moving to a new state, or anything else, always confirm the details directly with the Social Security Administration or through your official online account. Rules can be layered and specific to individual circumstances, and what applies to one person's situation might not apply exactly the same way to yours. Now, let's talk about something simple but incredibly important heading into July: keeping your direct deposit and mailing information up to date. If you've recently changed banks, switched to a new account, or moved to a different address, this is the time to double-check that the Social Security Administration has your correct information. Donna actually ran into a frustrating situation a couple of years ago when she switched banks but forgot to update her direct deposit details with Social Security. Her payment was delayed for nearly 2 weeks while everything got sorted out, and it was a stressful experience she never wants to repeat. Updating this information is simple. It can be done directly through the My Social Security online account, by phone, or in person at a local Social Security office. It takes just a few minutes, but it can save you from weeks of unnecessary delay if something were to go wrong. Let's pause here and talk about something that often gets overlooked: paper checks. While the vast majority of Social Security recipients now use direct deposit, there is still a small group of beneficiaries who receive paper checks through the mail. If you're in this group, it's especially important to understand that mailed checks can take a few extra days to arrive compared to direct deposit, simply due to postal delivery times. The Social Security Administration generally recommends waiting at least a few business days past your scheduled payment date before reporting a missing paper check. If you're someone who still receives a paper check and finds yourself wanting more reliability, switching to direct deposit or even a direct express debit card option can significantly reduce the waiting and guesswork each month. At this point, you might be wondering, what happens if your payment simply doesn't show up at all on your expected date? Here's what the Social Security Administration recommends. First, wait until the third business day after your expected payment date. If it still hasn't arrived by then, that's when you should contact the Social Security Administration directly, either by phone or by visiting your local office. Acting too early can sometimes create unnecessary confusion, since processing delays of a single business day are not unusual and almost always resolve on their own. Let's bring all three of our characters together for a moment, because each of their stories represents a different piece of the larger puzzle. Michael represents the standard retirement schedule tied to his date of birth. Donna represents the SSI schedule tied to the first of the month with that important holiday exception. And Anthony represents SSDI, which follows the same birthday-based system as retirement benefits, along with that older exception for longtime beneficiaries who started before May of 1997. Understanding which category you fall into is honestly the single most important step in knowing exactly when to expect your July payment. Once you know your category, the rest becomes much simpler to predict, month after month, without the stress of guessing. Before we wrap up, let's talk briefly about planning ahead. Many financial advisors who specialize in working with retirees recommend treating your Social Security payment date like a fixed, predictable part of your monthly budget rather than something you have to actively track and worry about. Once you know your specific payment day, whether that's the first, the third, or one of the Wednesday groups based on your birthday, you can build your other bills and expenses around that date with much more confidence. Michael, for example, has started scheduling his rent payment 2 days after his Social Security deposit lands, giving himself a small buffer in case his bank takes a little extra time to process things. This kind of small planning adjustment might seem minor, but for so many retirees and disabled Americans living on a fixed income, that little bit of breathing room between when the money arrives and when the bills are due can make an enormous difference in reducing financial stress. There's another rule that often causes confusion, especially for newer beneficiaries, and it's worth addressing directly. Some people assume that if their payment date falls on a federal holiday, like the 4th of July, their payment will simply be skipped or significantly delayed. That's not accurate. If your scheduled Wednesday payment happens to land on a holiday, the Social Security Administration generally still processes it on schedule, unless there's a specific announcement stating otherwise. The earlier payment rule we discussed mainly applies to SSI's first-of-the-month schedule, not the birthday-based Wednesday system that Michael and Anthony rely on. As we head toward the end of this video, let's circle back one more time to each of our three friends. Michael is expecting his retirement payment on the third Wednesday of July, based on his birthday falling between the 11th and the 20th. Donna already received her SSI payment at the very start of the month, following the standard first-of-the-month rule. And Anthony is watching for his SSDI deposit on the 4th Wednesday, based on his birthday falling later in the month. 3 different people, 3 different schedules, all part of the same larger system. And now, hopefully, a system that makes a lot more sense than it did when this video started. Before you go, we'd genuinely love to hear from you. Have you already received your Social Security payment this month, or are you still waiting on your scheduled date? Drop a comment below and let us know which category you fall into, retirement, SSI, or SSDI, and whether your payment showed up exactly when you expected it to. If this video helped clear up some confusion for you, do us a favor and share it with a friend or family member who might be wondering about the same thing. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to Prime Move Guide, because we'll be back next month walking you through exactly what's happening with your benefits, in plain English, with no confusion and no guesswork. This video is intended for educational purposes only and should not be considered legal, financial, or official government advice. For the most accurate and up-to-date information about your benefits, always visit the official Social Security Administration website or speak directly with an SSA representative.